My roots actually are in the East End of London from where we are now, but I grew up on a council estate in Essex. I come from a working class family. We lived in a council house. We weren't well off, we weren't poor as such, but say mum and dad both worked, and I had a good upbringing. I loved life as a kid. You know, we say I come up a council estate, we used to play in the fields and in the forest, played sports, so life was pretty good for me as a kid. I met my wife when I was 14. We got engaged at 17 and married at 19. Jackie worked, I worked. I served an apprenticeship as a carpenter in my young days. When I finished my apprenticeship back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a boom in the building industry, certainly around Essex, London, East Anglia. So I started to work for myself. And as I say, with the boom, I became pretty successful at a business. I started running different building sites. I built a business up, working alongside Jackie as well. Jackie, my wife, was working for me. And life was very good. We had a good marriage. We had 2 children. And life was pretty successful, really, I suppose, when you look at it. Good marriage, good home, a successful business, big house in Essex I had then, and a villa in Spain, and nice Jaguar car. You know, life was pretty good. I worked hard. No one gave us anything, you know. I worked hard for that, and life was successful. I was successful at it, and enjoyed life as well. My love of sport led me into training with weights, and where we're filming now was where I trained over 50 years ago. And my love of weights led me into powerlifting. And as a powerlifter, I became also successful as well. I competed for 30 years. 27 years I competed for Great Britain. I won 9 British titles, 6 European titles, 4 world titles. I was in the Guinness Book of Records, I'm in the Hall of Fame. And again, I became successful at that. But as much as I loved my sport, I believe I became addicted to it. I love training, I love this place. I've got so many memories being here. I just love being in the gym, feeling the weights on my back, the banter you had with the guys. I just love being in the gym, and I believe I became addicted to that. And like any addiction, you've got to fuel it. So how do I fuel it? How can I train? You can't train every day. You need to rest. The body recuperates, you need to rest, that's when the body grows. I started dabbling very, very lightly in drugs, just to try and give the body a bit of a boost, a bit of a kick. And thinking, because I was a strong man and I was an independent man and I was no educated, I'm not a scholar, but I'm no fool, I thought I could control it, but eventually the drug addiction took control of my life. I started taking steroids to fuel the body. I started taking speed and amphetamines to give me a bit of energy and a bit of a kick. And that led me into cocaine. And then I had a cocaine and steroid addiction that nearly ended my life. And when I say my life was close to ending, I'm not being melodramatic. The amount of steroids and cocaine I was taking should have killed me. A friend of mine who's a doctor told me if I continued, I would die. One of the side effects of any addiction is that it changes your way of thinking. Your normal way of thinking becomes distorted drastically. And of course mine did. And I changed. I was once a businessman, a husband, a father, a strong man as a competitor. And I'd like to think also I was a fairly well-respected man and liked man. But I'm now thinking a little bit differently. I'm now being fueled by a substance that is not normal. And the amount of stuff I was taking was far beyond normal. It started to rule my life. I had an adulterous affair, left my wife, deserted my children, blew my family to pieces. I was in the gym more than I was on site running my business, so I lost my business. Everything I'd ever worked for, I lost in 4 years of madness. I started to work as an illegal debt collector. I started to work on nightclub doors. I started to run this illegal business. I was making enemies all over the East End of London and getting a bit of a reputation for myself. I was now running around the streets of the East End of London, fighting almost every day just to stay alive. I was earning a bit of money, and good money at times, but I'm having to fight every day for it. My drug addiction, like many addictions, also causes depression, and I suffered with depression. I believe fear and paranoia were my best mates for 4 years. As big and as strong as I thought I was, I lived a permanent life of fear and paranoia. I was suffering big time, and I wanted to end my life. I actually tried to take my life on a number of occasions. I tried to cut my own throat, tried to crash the car, tried to overdose, and I tried to drown myself in Tenerife. I was sitting on a bench on the promenade looking out to sea, and I was literally just going to walk into the sea and drown myself. So I'm now thinking about what I'm going to do. And I heard a voice say, "You can't take your own life." And I remember looking up, and in the darkness, I could see a face. And I said, "Who are you?" And this face said, "I'm your father." And I said, "You're not my dad, my dad's dead." And then the face disappeared just like that. Now, in one of my sane moments, and there weren't many at this particular time, I went to see a guy to try and get off the drugs, try and get some normality back into my life. This man happened to be a Christian. Now, I knew nothing about God. This was my God. Powerlifting was my God. Lifting weights, I didn't go to church. Who needed God? I would have said then, like many people would even say today, well, if there's such a thing as God in this world, what's he doing? Because I would have said then, I'm a drug addict, I've lost my wife, my business, God's doing nothing for me. But I went to this man and he said something to me that has stuck with me. He said, "You need to choose." And how true that was then and how true it is today, because it doesn't matter where you are in life, whether you're rich, poor, young, old, man, woman, boy or girl, we have choices to make. Choices I was making weren't doing me a lot of favours. And of course, one of the other things is that there's a consequence also for your actions. And the consequences of my actions, my foolish actions, was that my life was close to ending. And he said to me, "You need to choose." He didn't patronise me or talk down to me. He didn't try to Bible bash me. He just listened and said, "Arthur, you need to choose." On a freezing cold March morning, not too far from this place, I stood in a car park at Spitalfield Fruit and Veg Market. I'd been at work that night collecting some money. I'd earned a few quid, and I remember standing there. I had a pair of trainers on, tracky bottoms, I had a singlet vest, I had a 12-inch diver's knife strapped to my arm, I had a 38 Beretta in my pocket, and I remember standing there thinking, what a mess my life is in. And I remember just looking up saying, "You know what? If there's a God, come and sort me out." There was no booming voice, no choir of angels, no opening of the heavens. But something happened deep inside that is very, very, very difficult to explain. But for the first time in 4 years, that fear and that paranoia left me. I remember standing in this car park, it was pitch black. And I remember looking into the car park. I parked my van in a very dark part of the car park. No one could see me coming, no one could see me going. But I was petrified of the dark, even from being a kid. And for the first time in my life, I could look into that darkness. And although it was black, it was as if I could actually see a light. But of course I couldn't see a light, but I was no longer frightened of the dark. I stopped my drug addiction that morning. I started to go to church. I started to read my Bible. I started to pray. I started to get in fellowship and friendship with people that started talking to me about God. But then they told me about Jesus, who meant absolutely nothing to me. I'd heard about him at school, But as far as I'm concerned, it was just a historical figure. But I believe from that moment I cried out to God and I put my trust in Jesus Christ, that my life started to change. And whether you choose to believe, to a point, as far as I'm concerned, is irrelevant, because this is the truth of my life. Whatever anyone says, whatever theological debate you want to have, you can go ahead and do it, but no one can argue the truth of my life. From that moment, I cried out to God and put my trust in Jesus Christ. My wife and I had been apart for 4 years. I'd broken her heart and smashed my family to pieces. We got reconciled together and we got remarried in 1993. I now have the love and respect of my children. My wife and I celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary this year. And I have everything that I need in my life. I even started to compete as a powerlifter again as a Christian. I loved it, lifting weights and sharing my faith. I believe, truly believe, that it's through the power of Jesus Christ that I can sit here today and tell you about my life and about what Jesus Christ has done with my life. My faith in Jesus Christ has given me these 3 things. I'm convinced of it, that I do have forgiveness of my past, I have a peace in the present, and I have a hope for the future. It is never too late, ever too late. God will never give up on you. Never given up on me. It's never too late, but you have to choose. And I believe if he can change me, he can change anyone. The choice is yours.